How's it going, guys? If you're looking at doing Vulcans like this and Spocks like that, then this is the video for you. Let's get into it. In this video, we're going to cover both the Vulcan, otherwise known as the air jibe, and the Spock together. The reason being is that the Vulcan is half of a Spock. And as soon as you start landing your first Vulcans, you're already going to be wanting to think about those Spocks and Spock 540s. As this is likely one of your first freestyle maneuvers, we're going to first take a look at how to get the board out of the water and look at the technique of the freestyle pop. So for the freestyle pop, first I want you to think about your windsurf board like a volleyball. When you sink a volleyball into the water and let go, it pings up to the surface and pops out the water. This is actually exactly what is happening with your freestyle windsurf board. The more pressure you put down on the volleyball, the more pop you're going to get up out of the water. It's important, therefore, that we have our weight over the middle of the board so that when we ourselves put weight through the board, it pops upwards. If our weight is outboard, then the volleyball or our windsurf board is not going to pop up cleanly. The easiest way to do this on your windsurf board is bring your weight over the center line inboard and put weight directly down. Once we've come onto our front foot and we've submerged the board, we want to quickly seesaw back onto our back foot to initiate the board coming into the air. At this point, it's important to release the mast foot pressure to allow the board to come up. Once your weight's on the back foot, the front of the board's going to come up, and you bring your back foot up to join it, and then you slowly come down, landing flat on the water. The key here is not to go for as much height as possible. You only need to clear the fin from the water. It's really fundamental to learn this pop first before you start looking to get your rotation. Once it becomes a natural habit, then you can start focusing on your Vulcan and the rest of the rotation. What I like to do is do several pops on one run. So I'll do my pop, keep sailing for a little bit, do another pop, do this 3 or 4 times, and then on the last go, then I'm going to have a go at my Vulcan or my Spock so that I'm warmed up and I have the feeling already in the board. Now you've got your pops dialed in, it's time to start looking at how to get that rotation into the Vulcan. The first thing to do in your preparation as you're building up for the Vulcan is to slide that front hand all the way to the boom clamp. The reason being is that we're obviously going to be going to the other side of the boom, and if we have our hand as close to the boom head as possible, it's going to make that transition as smooth as possible. Try doing a few more pops like this with your front hand here, just to get used to that feeling of being in that new position. What's also going to help you is having a lot of speed. The more speed you have, the less true wind, the true power in the sail, which is going to make initiating the rotation much more comfortable. The angle of sail we want to be on is across the wind or even slightly downwind. If you're underpowered, I recommend going more downwind for more speed. But if you're overpowered and you're looking for a little bit more control, that's when you come across the wind a little bit more. Now you're comfortably going along at speed, you're looking for that piece of water to take off of for your Vulcan and your Spock. Now with the Vulcan and Spock, it's super important that you don't go too high. This is going to give you way more control, and you really only need to clear the fin. So with that in mind, what piece of water are we looking for? We're looking for a flat piece of water. It's going to give you the most control on the pop, but it's also going to give you lots of control when you're sliding backwards. And if that's a new experience, then that's going to be super important. With all of this in place, it's now time to initiate that Vulcan and Spock rotation. So like we practiced for our pops, bring yourself inboard with that front hand further forward. And of course you want to be unhooked at this point. There's nothing worse than a hooked in Vulcan crash. So to initiate the rotation, we are going to pop the board. As we're coming up for the pop, we're going to bring that back arm closer to us. Now it's a combination of releasing this power and looking over our shoulder, which is going to initiate the rotation. If we try and think about kicking our feet around, this is going to put our body in the complete wrong position later in the rotation. So it's really important to remember that a lot of the rotation comes from the sail, not from the board. At the moment you feel the fin release from the water, this is the moment you're going to release the power in the back hand and look over your shoulder into the rotation. At this point, your front hand can be pushing down, which is going to help initiate the nose of the board to engage with the water, and this is going to act as a pivot point, and you're going to pivot around the nose of the board. As you start coming around the rotation, you want to think about you swapping positions with the sail. So you want to come from here and across. Now, it's very important that you don't get too close to the sail. If you become too close to the sail, everything happens in a too tight a space, and you normally end up falling backwards like so. You want to keep the sail at arm's length. It doesn't have to be locked out, but it needs to be at arm's length so that you have space to reach underneath the sail. So as you come around, the sail comes around in front of you. It's important to always keep the sail moving. If the sail is stationary at any point during this initial 180 rotation, it means that you're going to be behind the rotation and you're going to be playing catch up the whole time throughout the maneuver. To help this, I like to think about keeping my arm at a 90-degree angle. I want the sail far away from me so that I have got space to maneuver to the new side of the boom, but I also don't want it to be left out there too wide. Otherwise, you're going to struggle to reach around to the new side, and that's going to shift your weight away from the center line of the board. We want to be reaching to the new side of the boom just before we land sliding backwards on the board. If we are sliding backwards already and trying to maneuver the sail, we end up with our weight shifting backwards, and this then is the crash where you end up falling out the back of the rotation. So if you're having this crash, this means that you need to be faster with your hands and keep that weight over your front leg. There are several techniques to get to the new side of the boom. You can either go boom to boom, which means that you're going from your boom to the new side of the boom straight away, or you can go boom to mast, where as you reach, you grab the mast to help pull the sail across, and then you can grab the boom on the new side. The reason I do prefer to go to the mast is that I can keep that sail moving faster through the rotation. It also means I'm lower, which gives me a lot more control later on when I'm sliding backwards in those rotations. For the Vulcan, we are only doing this 180-degree turn. So from here, we need to land, slide backwards, and then sail forwards again in switch stance. This is something you can practice actually in the lighter winds, and get yourself comfortable in that switch stance position so that when you do land your Vulcan and you're ready to sail away, you don't get catapulted out the front. One of the biggest things I see is people do a great takeoff, great rotation, but they sheet in the sail too early, which means that they get whipped forward and they don't have the control. So getting yourself comfortable in that switch stance position on a longboard in the lighter winds is going to really help you. A great drill to practice the landing for your Vulcans is to go out in the light winds on your shortboard and get into the foot straps. From here, you're going to have to keep your weight really far forward and really initiate lots of mast foot pressure to keep that board nice and flat. Once you're comfortable in that position, then you can do some light wind in the strap jibes. And what you have there is a hand change, and you come out switch stance, needing to be forwards on that front foot with lots of mast foot pressure. This is exactly what happens in the landing of a Vulcan. So I would really recommend trying this when you have that light wind day, either when the wind's dropped after your session or you're waiting for the forecast to come in. This is a great warm-up drill that's going to help you and save you lots of time and frustration later on. Once you've slid back, sheeted in the sail, sailed away in switch stance, celebrated your first Vulcan, congratulations, I've completely forbid you to deliberately go for another Vulcan ever again. The reason being is, if you start getting into this habit of trying to Vulcan, then it's going to really stunt your progression with the Spock. Obviously, when you're trying Spocks, it might happen to be that you don't get that extra rotation and you end up doing a Vulcan. That's absolutely fine, of course. But I really want you to focus on keeping that sail moving so we can now move forward into the Spock, which is a natural progression in your windsurf freestyle career. Moving on to the Spock then, what actually is a Spock? A Spock is a Vulcan or air jibe combined with a switch stance helitack. So there's no prize to guessing what I'm going to get you to do next. That's right, it's switch stance helitacks on a longboard in light winds. It genuinely is exactly the same exercise, and it teaches you exactly where the power is and at what point you need to flip the rig. So if you can get your hands on a longboard, go and do that. I really highly recommend it. If not, you still can do it on your shortboard. It just takes obviously a little bit more balance and a bit more wind. As good as this exercise is to show you where to place the sail throughout the Spock rotation, It's actually not the pressure in the sail that is giving you that rotation. It's the momentum from the board. So how do we unlock that momentum? Well, we look over our shoulder, which is gonna put our weight slightly more onto our heels, which is gonna unlock that rail, allowing you to slide around while you're still using that good sail movement, so that once you come around through the wind and you're back across the wind again, you can then flip the rig. Actually, sometimes I would say it's easier to do a Spock 540, so you don't have to flip the rig again. You just carve out on your toes, like you would out the end of a jibe into switch, and then you've already got that switch experience from your first Vulcan you landed earlier that session. If you're still struggling after this with your Vulcans and Spocks, I've left my email address in the description of this video. Feel free to send me your clips and I will break them down in future videos so that we can all help each other as a community learn from one another. Thanks so much for watching the video, guys. If you enjoyed the content, I've got plenty more on the channel. Feel free to subscribe if you want to keep up with what I'm up to on the water, and I will see you in the next video.